Okay, so I'm Sarah, and my presentation's on Pulp Fiction and the skating party. So first, we're gonna do characters in Pulp Fiction. So there's Vincent Vega and Jules Weinfeld, which are the hitmen, and they work under Marcellus Wallace, who's the boss. Then there's Butch, who's a boxer, and then there's Pumpkin and Honey Bunny, who are robbers, and they're only really seen at the start and the end of the movie. Characters in Skating Party, there's Uncle Nathan, Delia Sykes, Eunice Sykes. Those are the three that we're going to be focusing on today, but the story is actually told by the young girl Maida, and her parents, Will and Winnie, are also in it. So for a quick summary of Pulp Fiction, it is three stories that eventually all come together, and the cool thing about this movie is the timelines of the stories are all mixed up. Within the whole plot of the movie, there's a lot of dialogue that has to do with moral philosophy. This also has a lot to do with death versus life and the idea of honesty and dishonesty. For Skating Party, the uncle falls in love with a woman he cannot be with, so he decides to marry her sister instead. At the end of the story, we hear about the big accident between the two sisters and a hole in the ice, which they both fall into. He gets to make a decision on who to save and decides to save the woman he loves rather than his wife. For the rest of his life, he ponders on his choices. So I'm looking at these two stories through the moral criticism lens. The moral criticism lens is basically looking at the rights and wrongs of values, as well as ethics people use every day and conditions of morals people face. There are two main key words that I use: morals, which is a person's standard of belief and what is acceptable to them, and ethics, which are a moral principle or the knowledge of what moral principles are. Which brings me to the topic of redemption and my thesis. Human nature has a constant need to create high morals and proper ethics. Redemption is the idea of an action that can save you from previous sins or the action of gaining something in exchange for payment. The use of redemption can be a possible answer to why some criminals should be judged differently from the idea of killing one to save others, the belief of doing what is right, and reflection. In Pulp Fiction and Skating Party, both explore the topic of redemption. So there is an idea that the act of killing one person for the idea of saving another takes away from evil intention. It is a form of redemption and can be a possible explanation for some murders. In both the short story and movie, there is an act of murderous redemption. In Pulp Fiction, before Jules would kill someone, he would read a line from the Bible that says, "The path of the righteous man is beset on all sides by the iniquities of the selfish and tyranny of evil men. Blessed is he who in the name of cherish and goodwill shepherds the weak through the valley of darkness, for he is truly his keeper and the finder of lost children. And I will strike down upon thee with great vengeance and furious anger those who attempt to poison and destroy my brothers. And you will know my name is the Lord when I lay my vengeance upon thee." This whole line is explaining how the act of this crime is redeemable due to the fact that it's for a good cause, which in this case was protecting his boss. In the short story, the uncle had a choice to save one girl or the other. Now, it's not exactly murder, but at the same time it is, because he had a choice of who he could allow to save. He had to give away one thing to save the other, which is redemption. For a real-world example, in Texas, a father beat to death a man who raped his 5-year-old daughter. The act of killing a man is not right, and it's immoral, but it was in trade for the man raping his young daughter, which is a perfect example of what redemption is. This explains how the idea of redemption can be used as a reason for some crime and how one bad and one good neutralizes each other. Determining whether or not it is moral or immoral act is not possible due to this fact. This brings me to the next topic, the belief of doing what is right. The idea of doing what is right is different to everyone, so everyone must have different beliefs on what is a good moral and what is a bad moral. In Pulp Fiction, Jules decides to change his ways. He says, "I don't want to kill you, I want to help you." Normally he would kill those who did something wrong, but in this case he realized that the robber couple who did something wrong could also redeem themselves. So both sides could do the right thing and both redeem themselves of their bad actions. Now in the short story, the uncle and his old lover decide to go on a skate alone. "I don't ever want to turn back," she said. "I gave in before Delia did," Uncle Nathan said. He admitting to knowing he was doing something wrong and stopped it from going any further. Even though he did a bad act, he redeemed himself by going back and doing the right thing. Redeeming oneself can happen in many ways, and if criminals were to help each other, they should be able to also redeem themselves and be treated like good people again. This is the whole idea of doing what's right. So the idea of redemption also has a lot to do with reflection and feeling remorseful. Once the person accepts what they did was both good and bad, it should allow acceptance from everyone. In Pulp Fiction, Vincent says a very smart line. "Did you ever hear the philosophy that once a man admits he is wrong, he is immediately forgiven for all his wrongdoings?" This line explains how admitting doing something wrong, even if it was for good, allows for acceptance. In In the short story, the uncle had a choice between his life or his lover, and this decision stayed with him the rest of his life. He had to choose between a simple two things. I wanted both, Uncle Nathan said. This shows he reflected on his past choices, and this reflectiveness is a sign of remorse. It makes what he did okay because he accepted his bad and his good choices. Accepting that an act was wrong is another way of regaining that goodness factor. It allows people to redeem themselves and be seen as a good civilian again. For criminals who admit their wrongful acts should be allowed another chance, and their bad crimes should be canceled out. To conclude this moral dilemma, all criminals need to have a better evaluation system and state reasons for their crimes, especially if it comes down to redemption. I rate this movie 5 out of 5 stars because it's my favorite movie of all time. It had very funny and great dialogue, and it has a great message. And this is my works cited.